Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session. We're ready to start. So, welcome to this session on an emerging phenomena that we have seen across South Asia called informal online commerce. For the last 2 years, CGAP has spent some time examining this issue across several countries, specifically Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, in coordination with local partners such as NRSP that have brought their own rich contextual understanding to the findings. We are going to be sort of going over the topic and diving deeper into some of the findings that we've had specifically for the Pakistan context during the next hour and a half. Our agenda for today is as follows. We're going to start with a joint presentation by CGAP and NRSP. We will then move on to a moderated panel discussion with our experts before opening up to a Q&A session for the audience. And then in closing, we'll just share some brief next steps from our own end. Just to share the rules, the session will be recorded, so just be aware of that. And please put any questions that you may have in the chat box, and then we'll get to those in the relevant section. So to kick off this entire thing, I'd like to introduce our panelists, our presenters for the evening, Yasmin Bin-Humam and Dr. Rashid Bajwa. Yasmin is a financial sector specialist at CGAP who works on analyzing excluded segments to more closely examine who remains financially excluded and how financial services might impact their lives. She also serves as a focal point for CGAP's gender mainstreaming and manages an industry-wide community of practice on women's financial inclusion. Before joining CGAP, Yasmin developed indicators measuring women's equality under the law for the World Bank's Women, Business, and the Law project and contributed to a variety of publications on legal barriers to women's economic empowerment. Her earlier work experiences span the public, private, and non-governmental sectors. Dr. Rashid Bajwa is the CEO and founding member of the National Rural Support Program, Pakistan's largest not-for-profit organization, which is aimed at poverty alleviation for the rural poor. Across his 16 years with the organization, Dr. Bajwa has helped set the company's strategic direction, and under his leadership, the company has grown exponentially. Today, NRSP works in 72 districts across Pakistan and has organized 3.7 million community members and trained 4.8 million rural households in managerial and vocational training. Moreover, during this time period, NRSP has grown to become the country's largest microfinance provider. And as CEO, Dr. Bajwa was instrumental in successfully leading the transformation of the microfinance operations to a regulated deposit-taking, privately owned microfinance bank. So over to you, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, Neha, for that introduction. And Daniel, if you can bring up the slides, please. Thanks for that. So what I'll be doing, everyone, is I'll just be setting the stage at a very high level to kick things off. One of the things that CGAP does is explore either new trends or trends that are perhaps underexplored and underappreciated. And that's what we think we have here with informal online commerce. So let me begin by defining what we mean by this term. To us, informal online commerce is a variant of online commerce in which goods are bought and sold not on e-commerce platforms, but via social media platforms. So we dub this e-commerce without the e-commerce platform. Let me go into a bit more detail. Daniel, if you can go to the next slide, please. So what this looks like is it occurs when individuals and largely unregistered businesses sell goods over social and communications platforms such as Facebook and WhatsApp. And these platforms existed or were started mainly to facilitate social connections, not commerce. So if we begin with a typical e-commerce transaction, an example of a platform like this in Pakistan might be Daraz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But you can see that all of these steps, the discovery, the price determination, the payment determination. Are you going to pay cash on delivery? Are you going to pay with a credit card online? The delivery mechanism determination. Are you going to rush ship it, for example? And then the customer service, for example, this product was defective when it arrived. All of that is mediated by the e-commerce platform. Whereas in informal online commerce, that is very customized by the entrepreneur who is running the business. What e-commerce and informal online commerce share sometimes is that sometimes social media platforms might direct people to e-commerce platforms, so they're used as marketing, whereas in informal commerce, they're really more core to the business. So if we go to the next slide, I'll walk you through a typical stylized transaction, and then Dr. Bajwa will give us more color and more flavor about what we typically see in the Pakistan context. So typically, people will join a Facebook group or come across a Facebook group in which a seller is offering their various products, and what they'll do is they will contact the seller either in a comment to a photograph of the product, or they will send a message via instant Facebook Messenger. And once the seller determines that this person really is interested in buying the product, they'll often move the conversation over to WhatsApp, so it can be conducted privately, bilaterally, so that there's a phone number associated with it. And that's where the negotiation of price, payment methods, and delivery terms happen. So they're engaging in real time with the seller. So in e-commerce, these things are done on platform with the click of a mouse button from some preset options. And then, of course, once all of that is agreed upon, the product is dispatched to the buyer, and then the buyer inspects it and will pay either the full amount or the remainder of the amount. So let me delve more into how this differs from e-commerce in important ways. So when you go to an e-commerce platform, you typically have a large product range, whereas with informal online commerce, you're really dealing with one seller. And so it's a much more limited range. Those entrepreneurs typically source from smaller, perhaps informal suppliers, or they make the products themselves if it's handicrafts. Increasingly, we're seeing that they are, sourcing from larger businesses as their businesses grow, but that's not always necessarily the case. As mentioned before, they advertise on social media, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and word spreads by word of mouth often. People who like that seller, like their products, refer their friends to come and join that group as well, or to follow that particular merchant. As mentioned before, the e-commerce, the prices are often fixed, whereas informal online commerce, you're engaging in real time with the seller. Oftentimes, payment in informal online commerce is done by cash on delivery. This happens with e-commerce platforms as well, but the platforms have an incentive to motivate people to pay digitally online, so that they can charge fees and whatnot for that. Oftentimes in informal online commerce, the delivery is personally conducted, though sometimes also through family, friends, or third-party vendors. And then aftercare is very important for informal online commerce because it's very much built on reputation. And I will speak a little bit more to this in the next slide, please. Thank you, Daniel. So informal online commerce works for women because it enables them to what we call monetize their network. So they have perhaps not sophisticated, marketing skills, perhaps not the most sophisticated digital skills, but they have networks, friends, family, associates, and this is what they are monetizing. These are who they initially begin to sell to. And they also monetize their standing within those networks. I mentioned reputation earlier. So someone with a good reputation is liable to get more customers, repeat customers. It allows for low-cost operation, often from home. It's flexible, easy to set up and exit, and it allows control for staying small scale or expanding to large scale. And that kind of flexibility to tailor their business size and business operations to what they are going through in the moment is very important to the entrepreneurs engaging in informal online commerce. So I'll end quickly by saying a few words about our methodology. If you can go to the next slide, Daniel, just so you think we didn't pull this out of a hat and make it up. What we did was we conducted semi-structured interviews with a wide array of entrepreneurs and stakeholders in Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, about 100 in each country. And then we went into a round 2 to dig deeper and conduct really human-centered design interviews and small focus group discussions with smaller groups of women in each country. And before Dr. Bajwa launches into the findings that we have from Pakistan in particular, I thought it might be interesting just to share some high-level comparative insights. So in Myanmar, what we found was that it had the most diverse experiences. You had micro enterprises, women selling lunchboxes, to really large-scale import-export ventures that had, tens of thousands of dollars of turnover within a year, using paid marketing features from Facebook and whatnot. In Myanmar, Facebook is really synonymous with the internet. And in both Bangladesh and Myanmar, we found that rural buyers value the digital financial services that allow them to make purchases. In urban areas, it's a bit more easy to pay cash on delivery because of the proximity. But in rural areas, this phenomenon was driving digital uptake. And finally, in Bangladesh, we heard a number of instances of e-commerce platforms approaching some of these women entrepreneurs who are selling via social media so that they could be listed on the platforms. And women were open to that, but they still didn't see it as their sort of primary way of doing business. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bajwa, who can tell us more about the findings in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. I think that's a great start. Starting, I think I must thank CGAP and the team to have given us this opportunity to do the research and also to see what is happening here in the country. Clearly, what we see is that we're witnessing a very important change of how micro businesses are going to be managed in future. And I think the CGAP and the team, they have, as usual, come up much earlier to actually document all this and to actually show to the other countries in the world, especially the developing countries, that how it can be done. This is a typical IOC business in Pakistan, and the centerpiece, of course, is the female. I'll just give you a few statistics. And this is the Financial Inclusion Insight Surveys, which shows that financial inclusion at the moment in Pakistan is 25%, and women are only 11%. And as you know, that financial inclusion and mobile phones go together. So we have a 65% total coverage of phones, mobile phones, 50% of women, but access to mobile internet is only 19%. So you can already see that less women have a smartphone, and most of them have a feature phone. And there is a lesson to it, and we'll come back to it, that what can be done about it. And the other thing is that it cuts across, this IOC business cuts across all socioeconomic segments. And what we have seen is that the sellers are mostly middle income, comes from middle and high income, which means that they can take a risk. So the risk takers are the ones who have some kind of a pocket and some depth in the pocket. And the hypothesis is that the lower income women, one, they can't take the risk, and the other, of course, is their very high demands on time versus the socioeconomic other segments, socioeconomic segments. And even more important is that women at the lower end of socioeconomic status perhaps don't even know about this kind of a business. So this is something which needs to be looked at, that what can be done in terms of advocacy and in terms of disseminating this information, that how they can also be part of this very interesting ecosystem, and how little capital investment is required, and we can talk about that further. Now, as I said, in our study, we found that IOC is perceived as a home-based business. Can we go next, Daniel? And of course, it is seen as an inferior to traditional carriers. It restricts access to resources, and women, of course, are, because we are a conservative society, so women are discouraged from pursuing non-traditional sectors. But it also gives freedom, like low capital investments, good stopgap arrangements, a very good exit, and the ability to remain segregated from men. How far they can do that is something which we will take up. And but it allows a flexibility to balance between the more important women activities which are perceived by the household, particularly men, of care taking and life events. So in this situation, if a woman can come in, that was going to be something which is going to be bring in a big change. At the moment, if you go ahead, I'll talk about the socio-economic norms and impacts. From the financial health, as I said, women are frowned upon. Women have to devise alternate approaches that limit interactions, family members, and they don't have access to formal credit. There is this whole business of microfinance, and we know about it in South Asia. But to what extent the women control the money which is given in their name is something which needs to be looked at. So even if the loan is approved in the name of a woman, it doesn't mean that the woman has a control over it. So that is another issue. And the more important thing is that incomes from this IOC are generally used to meet household expenses rather than business investments, because obviously people don't see it, particularly the men don't see it as a very serious business unless and until it starts expanding. And then suddenly things change. And we have seen that men then become a kind of a help or a passive partner in this whole thing once, the economies of scale start putting up, and the men start seeing that, oh, this is money which is coming in. So basically, what we see is that it is challenging the gender norms. And although women face barriers to access to education, but it doesn't raise much barriers for women in terms of education or professionalism or education. And but of course, capital needs to grow. And at the end of the day, women are dependent upon the male household members. And as I said, some of them become involved in women's businesses. especially when they start growing up and they move up the scale. So I think it's important to realize that how important then this whole tool, the smartphone, becomes in this whole business, and the knowledge of it. And why is it that women do not have access to smartphones? There are social issues that this is not the time to raise about them, but there is a clear-cut social issue regarding that women do not feel confident, and men don't feel confident to give their counterpart women a smartphone, particularly which has an internet connected connection. So the cross-cutting theme from Pakistan is that it has an opportunity to lead to women's advancement. And as I said, the reliance on male partner is there, but these are very trust-dependent businesses. So one bad customer experience and the entire brand value can go down. So it's very important in the startups to ensure the quality and the product which is being shown to be delivered. Time is also very important. So, but of course, there are very low barriers to entry, and so people who have prior experience of businesses and entrepreneurial experience in higher education have a distinct advantage. I'll give you an example. Many of the shopkeepers who were doing retail business have started offering these services now. And this is very interesting. I mean, I don't know whether in Pakistan, there is a mango season now. You go to Facebook, all the farmers who have orchards, mango orchards, have started selling mangoes online. In fact, I bought 7 kilograms of the best mangoes for 1,400 rupees. When the retail price of those, the quality of that mango here in Islamabad is probably 300 rupees. So I got it for 200 rupees direct from the producer. So that is the link. And it was just that, as Yasmin was saying, that you see a picture on Facebook and there's a little telephone number. You go to WhatsApp, you ring them up, and this guy picks up. So you pay through EasyPaisa or through any other, medium. And after 2 days, you get the product. And it's sitting in my kitchen, for example, and it's one of the best quality products which I've actually bought. So what the takeaway is that it offers distinct advantages to both relatively uneducated women whose career options have been limited, as well as to highly educated women. Of course, the highly educated women have they have an advantage over them. And as we have discussed, we see that different aspects of IUC ecosystem, like women are often forced to rely on male help as intermediaries as a result of social norms. This will remain. This won't go away. Poor experience of an IOC can obviously damage the business, and many opportunities are here for women across socioeconomic segments. And for persons like us who have our roots in the rural areas, and we are a rural support programs, where jobs are limited, and even the male jobs are limited. Here comes an opportunity where females in their free time can actually start pursuing their careers and their aspirations if they want to do that in terms of linking up with the buyers. So then let's see who is involved in this whole segment. Can we go next? So this is a grid which we have found, which has been formed by the CGAP team, and you can see that on the y-axis this digital literacy, and the x-axis is the level of financial inclusion, and clearly that on the grid, the level of digital literacy and level of financial inclusion, these are the two key factors, and we see that level of digital literacy and level of financial inclusion as both increase as the type of personas engaged in IUC also increase. So you can see that most of them are on the upper right quadrant. And we can look at it. So higher the digital literacy and the higher the level of financial inclusion, you find what we call people who are more going to succeed more. So who are these? Like privileged entrepreneurs, youth, and as they said, established converts. And on the other side, on the lower left quadrant, you see the digital newcomer. And we will explain, we will try to explore these two. Let's go to the first lower left quadrant. Next slide, please. So these are older, established, and confident players in their ability to run a business, but they're very new to digital media and heavily reliant on more tech-savvy family members because of their low digital literacy. Most are women, as we were talking about it, and depend on family for access to both payments and transfer as well as credit. And they are the older people engaging in IOC and have built their customer base through personal contacts, but seek to expand their reach using social media. So they are entrepreneurs, but now they are using this digital media to expand their business. And most of them are in the food and catering businesses. And you can see the numbers that, length of time of business, 2 to 4 years, social media channels, it's the same, Facebook, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger and others. And how do they do the transactions, mobile money, bank transfers, savings and others. So this is one. Now we go to the other part of the quadrant. Can we go next? So these are the privileged entrepreneurs. So these are the ones who see a gap in the market and use IOC along with their ability to access capital to fill them. They have a high risk appetite and are highly aspirational. And they are aspirational because they have a pocket and they have a financial pocket. They might not be very deep financial pocket, but at least they know that even if the business is not going to run, it's not going to, heavens are not going to fall. And they have, because they have a higher household income, very well educated, but despite being new to the IOC, they're confident in their ability to make their businesses profitable because of the exposure and education. So less risk, because even if the business fails, doesn't leave a lot of things unruffled. They are well established. If you look at the business profile here, as compared to the earlier segment, which was food and catering, we are talking about artisanal groups, handmade accessories, and food. And the time of the business is they're mostly startups, less than a year, but they use the same mediums, again, Facebook, Instagram, Viber. I think I've been told that the Instagram is now the more in thing, as we call, in terms of connecting with the DJ platform. And of course, then mobile money through the financial profile is the same. Banking, they can do bank transfers and they can have other mediums to use to transfer. So let me now talk about the ecosystem, IOC ecosystem in Pakistan. And this has been magged into a very complicated, it's kind of a complicated, I don't think so, but if you look at it, let's look at the headings. One is the financing and accounts. Second is the supply and production. This is the gray. We move to the third, which is marketing and sales. And then the fourth is payments, and the fifth is fulfillment. So rather than talking in this, we will take them. And then, of course, as you can see, there are several interlinked parts. So we will look at them, each one of them individually. Let's look at the financing and account part first. In the financing and account part, financing is dependent upon family members. This sometimes allows members to get involved in the businesses and create pressure on the business to succeed. So the more money from the parents or brothers and whoever, or the spouses. Online banking is preferred to mobile money due to social norms that limit female interaction with agents. This is another, in conservative societies, it's not a norm to go and talk to a male who is not known to you. So, you can't go to a third party agent most of the time. Often accounts are jointly held with a male family member and usually in the male names. And the use of business account is rooted in socioeconomic class with higher segments being more likely to open such an account. Now, if you look at the opportunities in this financing and accounts, that it promotes the use of financial tools and education across women sellers and also their communities and families, and it reduces barriers to entry for lines of credit and use of financial tools. And then it also changes the perception of home-based work to accommodate women's aspiration for professionalism, financial services, and allow more people to enter into the IOC business. I would be very interested to know, for example, that if this thing catches up, will the men in conservative societies start IOC business independent of women or not? So this is a question to the entire audience, that it might happen. Men might also be tempted to start some of their businesses. As I was saying, that the mango growers have started linking through the Facebook. And I've given you an example that I have got this product at about 50% less cost than in the market. So let's go to the second one, which is the supply and production. Here, women can access supply links through complementary IOC, which means that IOC itself is a value chain in its own right. So you can links up with other larger IOCs. Usually they use a male family member to access such product, and different channels are used. We've talked about them, same Facebook, WhatsApp. And businesses make compromises and structures their offering to enable market access based to whatever they are able to access, lump sums or favorable terms, cash liquidity, strength of their customer base, order volume, etc. And social norms create fewer barriers to accessing supply markets in the digital world versus the real world. And the opportunity that, enable the women, an environment where women can create their clear structures and roles in their businesses and promote access to business education to further women's understanding of business decisions, planning, and structures. So this was the supply and production. Let's go to the third one, which is the product marketing and sales. Here again, same different social media channels are used. Then switching over to WhatsApp, and the knowledge curve is obviously higher for Facebook and Instagram, but WhatsApp and Facebook helps obscure aspects of online identity, thus allowing IOC to breach boundaries between classes. So this is very important. And then there is the trust is critical for businesses to grow, and loyal customers are offered more favorable terms, business terms. And businesses are concerned about IP theft, and they're limiting ways to enforce rules around them. Coming back to the example of the mango growers, I would not be surprised if because of this competition which is coming up as a parallel thing, one would see a decline in the retail shops, the price of the products, because now there is a competition which is linking directly the producer and the consumer. So this is an ideal situation to me. And so the opportunities here in this product marketing and sales is that you create not only the products, the product itself and the business, but also build the digital skills. So it's a very important tool, a vicarious tool for kind of digital skills and financial inclusion. And then it creates mechanism that allows for more trust between buyers and sellers. So it happens through streaming of customers acquisition to minimize platform switching. And then promote access to business education. We talked about that. So this could be another way of how business education can be done. Next is the payment and reconciliation. in Pakistan, which we have seen that cash on delivery is by far the dominant method of payment. And the reason is that that in the mind of the buyer, he thinks that he can, if he sees the product, he can still, decline not to have it and not pay. But I have seen very few instances where the product, when it reaches the house, it is rejected. So, but more importantly, it does not allow any kind of it allows the payments without any, track. So you have cash, you pay the cash, and that's about all. And of course, the sellers prefer some kind of a level of advance payment. Most of the time, it doesn't happen for this IUC. I've seen for big orders, of course, bank transfers are used, and bank transfers are used where the seller has an established business. Like, for example, if you want to buy coffee beans from Karachi, then you can go to the seller and he will ask you to pay a bank transfer. If you have a lower business, then they will ask you to pay. They will also prefer to have a cash on delivery through the to one of the vendors who are selling. You are bringing the products to them. So the opportunities here are, it allows for more trust between buyers and sellers, such as live order tracking, also provides measures to hold buyers and sellers accountable. I don't know, these measures, which the best way of accountability is that, as I said, that the product and the quality of the product. And once you feel that the quality of product is not up to your mark, you can easily stop buying from them. So that hurts the seller more than anything else. And we talked about that earlier on. And then you can make tailored payments, networks of women agents supporting women's access to digital financial services. We are doing one experiment where we are giving a smartphone to a woman in a village and also giving her a digital kind of a loan on the smartphone in her wallet. And then she uses this money and women around the neighborhood would come and pay for mobile top-ups or for paying bills. And now we have added on buying tickets. Smaller transport companies have also started now selling tickets at a discounted rate. If you can buy the ticket for a travel, maybe 15 days advance or something. And so people who have a plan to go from one village to maybe Karachi or to Islamabad or where, they can use this facility. It's becoming very popular, actually, buying tickets online through this lady. So this woman, I think, becomes the core. It's kind of a agent which is sitting at home, and once all the money, the digital money is completely consumed, then she calls one of our super agents, and he comes on a motorbike, takes the cash, and gives her the commission, and also puts in a new loan amount digitally to her. So this is the way it works. And in rural areas, I think this has a lot of promise. Already the women have started talking about selling some social products like soaps and other things through this, and we are working on that as well. So let's come to fulfillment now. So in fulfillment, you see that there's a need to streamline the delivery process to ensure constant communication, standardize and proactively share the returns of refund processes if there are some, and create more channels, additional channels for the IUC, and encourage and support delivery providers who want to establish their own delivery services. And then, of course, there's a big room for research in relevant regional businesses. There is one business which is being talked about, the Mishu kind of a business. But in terms of couriers, I think platform delivery services such as Bykea have emerged as alternate to the TCH, which was established. So there is there's a new kind of a kid around the block. Some sellers prefer to work with trusted individual couriers. So some of the sellers, particularly food manufacturers and high-end food manufacturers and suppliers, home-based, they would use their husband or their brothers or some of their own couriers to deliver the food. And then vertical integration with the couriers is useful as it allows greater control, especially if it comes to delicate items such as perishables. But it all depends upon the payment options. The delivery options are actually dependent upon the payment options. So coming now, winding up, I think let's look at the opportunity areas. Can we go to the next, perhaps the last slide? Okay. One, of course, is that we need to do more additional research and deepen the understanding of the IUC's potential and target emerging areas, including consumer trust and other things. There is a big space for experimenting new financial tools and products like the electronic payment products, inventory management tools, and capital for IUC. And then, of course, on targeting online and business training, this is important, tailor skills training to the needs of different IUC segments and encourage the emergence of new businesses, particularly in rural areas. Most of them at the moment are all urban-based. But there are clear advantages to this IUC, and let me talk about a few of them quickly. I call it the time. And this is an acronym, which means that there is no tax involved, no internet infrastructure in a big way involved, no middleman, and no extra. I mean, you produce and you pay. So you get an order and then you produce. So there is no inventory, there's no extra, there is no, perhaps not any space to hire any additional staff. So there's no salary involved. So this is the time, tax, IT infrastructure, middlemen, and extras. But there are clear policy level takeaways for that. One is that as you know, that there is a new program which is going to be launched where the government is offering interest-free loans. Now, this is something which is very important. And they're talking about billions of rupees of interest-free loans going to startups. And what more startup can one see than this IUC businesses? The other is there is a need to train, as we've talked about, such entrepreneurs, or at least give them some knowledge that this is a legitimate business where a producer and a consumer are connected together. And of course, the government may not get any income tax out of it, but for sure they will get a lot of indirect taxes through, the general sales tax and etc. So the message for donors and for other entities or interested nonprofits is that have a look at it very seriously, because this is going to be the future. And I'm very glad that we have with us Google, who's representing. And I thank Google to be there, because they have this product already launched in India. And they are keenly looking at to launch a similar product in Pakistan. And if you're able to do that, I think that would be a great opportunity to look at what they've done, what they call the Sathi program. And the other more important thing is that Google has also launched a Google phone, which is a smartphone like a feature phone. I think Jazz have started selling it. And so just imagine that these are the two additional opportunities which might be linked together to come up with something which is big. And we need a media campaign or a media strategy also to showcase this and to show to potential entrepreneurs. And I can tell you, in Pakistan, every household is an entrepreneur. that they can do according to their own thinking and everything, that what is it that they can do while they're staying in the house. Just to give you an example, I was just joking that I was imagining an apartment building, and one lady is preparing food for the entire apartment building, and the entire time of all the women living in the apartment building is unlocked to pursue businesses, because now the food is being prepared at the central place, and there is no courier. You can just move up the stairs and provide this product to them, and they can check the quality as well. So it's kind of a homeowners association, it's a kind of a cooperative, but one person doing one job, one person doing the other job, and the rest unlock their time. Because to me, uh, housing, housekeeping, and cleaning and cooking actually consumes most of the productive time of women. And if with IUC we can unlock it, just imagine how much entrepreneurial activities we can generate. So I leave it to you. What do you think about it? And does it hold a promise in Pakistan? And if so, how much and how should we approach it? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bajwa, and thank you, Yasmin, for giving us that rich deep dive into the learnings of IOC, both generally and in Pakistan. So to learn more, we're now going to move on to our panel discussion. For this, I'd first like to introduce our moderator for the afternoon, Roest, who is a senior financial sector specialist with CGAP. Joep is based in Singapore and represents CGAP in East Asia and Pacific, with most of his time being dedicated to Myanmar, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and China. He focuses on government-to-person payments and how digital platforms are affecting the financial lives of the poor. Prior to joining CGAP, Joep helped establish Wing Mobile Money in Cambodia. He later moved to Papua New Guinea to work on UNCDF's mobile money project spanning the South Pacific. He then spent 4 years as a member of Queen Maxima's team at the UN. Over to you, Joep.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neha. I also wanted to thank Dr. Bajwa and Yasmin for setting the stage so well. So we have a panel for you with 3 very interesting guests. Of course, now we've heard about informal online commerce, but I think it would be very useful to actually hear from some practitioners who are actually engaging with informal online commerce directly. So we have 3 sort of premier panelists for you. I think before we start, I just want to highlight maybe why CGAP and NRSP are so interested in informal online commerce in the first place. First off, I think we think it matters. Informal online commerce seems to be a very large phenomenon. Basically, anywhere that we look, we see informal online commerce happening, but it's often not been recognized really for what it is. So we think it's bigger than one might suppose, but it's still largely hidden, with a lot of the interest going to formal things like e-commerce, which seems to take sort of all the limelight. And what we're attempting to do here is to frame what's already happening and show that it's actually a distinct type of commerce. And we hope that in doing so, that you find it persuasive and that you maybe see also potential in it. Because one of the things that's really stood out for us is, again, wherever we've looked, we see informal online commerce happening in all these different countries, but there are common themes to it. And that's also why we were able to show you the different personas, because those personas actually replicate across countries. The other thing that stood out is that we see mostly women engaged in this type of commerce, which we weren't looking for, but it sort of stared us in the face when we were doing our research. I would also say that's unusual here is that informal online commerce between the buyer and the seller seems to implicate not only upper class women, but seems to cut across social class. So it seems to take in, let's say, lower income women, which again is very, very interesting. And I think for an organization like NRSP and for CGAP, anything that has to do with women's economic empowerment, particularly low income women, is going to be of great interest. And we think also that informal online commerce has potential benefits. From our research, we've seen that there's, you can see that there's livelihood creation. These are actually livelihood strategies for these women. and we're actually seeing financial inclusion. What this is doing is it seems to be driving these participants into a relationship with financial services that wouldn't have otherwise existed. And over time, we're seeing this relationship deepen. And we're seeing livelihoods created because of this particular approach. So that's why we're interested, and that's why we're studying this. So for me personally, one of the major attractions to informal online commerce is that it wasn't CGAP that invented this. It wasn't Facebook that invented this. It was women on the ground that were creating this for themselves, bottom up, really in response to needs that they weren't seeing met through the formal financial system. So anywhere we look, we see this type of behavior happening, this type of commerce happening. And that's very, very interesting. So that's one thing I just want to highlight for everyone. And I'd also like to say about informal online commerce, the way that we framed it, we think it's useful to have it framed as being distinct from e-commerce, because we think it should be examined on its own merits as being very, very different. And only to say that, you know, what we are putting in front of you isn't the last word on this topic. Hopefully, this really is for us an attempt to frame, and hopefully we've been persuasive, and we can persuade others to research this in more depth, and maybe in other countries. So for today, for you, I have a number of different panelists, some esteemed panelists. I have Ms. Meenah Tariq, Ms. Sophia Salim, and Dr. Rashid Bajwa will be joining us again for the panel. And then I have a few questions for them each, after which we'll go to a Q&A session, which I'll use the chat. You can put your questions in for. So first, I'll just introduce Ms. Meenah Tariq. Ms. Meenah Tariq is a partner at Karavan Venture Capital. It's a VC firm that invests in early stage startups in Pakistan. Prior to that, she was head of strategy at Invest to Innovate in Pakistan. And really over the last couple of years, she has supported hundreds of women's SMEs across all industries. In so doing, she's worked a lot with the World Bank, DFID, USAID, and the World Bank's Women Entrepreneurs Financing Initiative. The way that she works is she encourages the entrepreneurial mindset in young people, helps them to develop sort of business acumen, and she conducts trainings on business creation and how to scale your business. She mentors startups and has taught entrepreneurship at local business schools. And last but not least, very impressive, she hosts a TV show in Urdu on entrepreneurship that goes out on national television. So Ms. Tariq, thank you for joining us. Our second panelist is Ms. Sophia Salim. She's the Chief Product Officer for Bykea, which was mentioned earlier by Dr. Bajwa. She too has a very extensive CV, which I probably won't do justice, but she has 17 years of experience in large corporations and startups, another entrepreneur in her own right. She studied at Stanford, the famous Stanford University in the US, focusing on management science and engineering, after which she became a Microsoft engineer. She has been involved in two startups, one called Ropazi, which is actually very close to what we're talking about today. It's a cloud-based full-service conversational commerce platform. It powers the sales channel for online retailers using AI and natural language processing. So it's a much more advanced version, really, of what we're talking about with different players, but it is related, and we might get into that. The second startup that she's involved in is called Datali, which builds products for consumer banking in the fashion space. Now that she's the Chief Product Officer for Bykea, which is a Series B startup that's pulled in 222 million and is aimed at disrupting the ride-hailing space in Pakistan. And lastly, we have Dr. Rashid Bajwa, who we've already introduced. So thank you all for joining us today. I have two questions each for you, and I'll go through each and every one of you one by one. I'd be very curious to hear sort of what you have to say. So my first question would be to you, Ms. Tariq. We see potential in informal online commerce as a vehicle for low-income women's livelihood creation and financial inclusion, as I just talked about. Do you agree with this framing for Pakistan? And do you have any thoughts on how these benefits might best be captured in your country? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. How do you pronounce your name again? Johan? Johan?
Johan.
Sorry, I don't. Johan.
It's
Johan.
fine.
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much for having me here today. So one of the things that I've been doing for the past couple of years are my training sessions that I've been running with the USAID SMEA, which is Small and Medium Enterprises Activity. And through them, I've been traveling to tier 2 and tier 3 cities across Pakistan, in particular training women entrepreneurs. So I've trained more than 600 women entrepreneurs to date on ground through 2-day training sessions. So it's almost like having a focus group session with 600 plus women in smaller cities across the country. And I have to say, I think all the findings are completely on point. I would say 95% of them, at the very least, if not more, are participating in IOC. And this is something that I had to learn when I ventured out of Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, because previous to this, my work had more been with startups, through my work with Invest to Innovate, which is a startup accelerator. So your small and medium enterprises, including I think I would say 100% of your micro enterprises are right now majorly involved in IOC. And particularly when you talk about women entrepreneurs, it is the one channel they're using. And I've had some conversations when this research was being done as well, and I shared then as well. It is primarily through WhatsApp, not even Instagram and Facebook. It's almost a channel through which you graduate. You start selling through WhatsApp, and as you learn more, you go towards Facebook, and then as you learn more, sometimes you graduate towards Instagram. So it's super interesting. And actually, TikTok has now joined the bandwagon as well. I actually know micro enterprises that are selling through TikTok, that are generating sales through TikTok. TikTok is on top of their funnel. So, in terms of potential, I think it has fantastic potential just because it is already happening on ground. Like you said, we didn't invent it. The women started doing it because all of the social barriers and the limitations within which they could start their business. This is the one avenue that was available to them. It's fascinating.
Thank you very much. I'll just, I'll throw another sort of follow-up question to you, Ms. Tariq. You were talking about TikTok getting into this, and we predict that platforms such as Facebook will seek to incorporate informal online commerce by formalizing it on their platform, by providing products that take in some of the transaction flow. Despite we think that IOC will persist because there are certain attributes that make it attractive, such as its flexibility and low barriers to entry. Does that sound convincing to you? And how do you think this will play out in Pakistan?
So I don't think Facebook will get into it, or at least not in the short term at all, or maybe not be able to do it successfully. So we have to understand, why is it that women or start doing it on WhatsApp versus Facebook, right? They're using WhatsApp, and most of them, or a lot of them at least, cannot read or write. So, Dr. Saab was just narrating his experience of buying mangoes. I too have bought mangoes this year from places in Sindh and Multan, but also everything else, right? My tailor is using WhatsApp. I send him clothes through Bykea. He will get them stitched. He will send me WhatsApp messages. I'll pay him through a mobile wallet, and he'll send it back. He'll stitch it and send it back to Bykea. So most of these people cannot read or write. They will communicate through WhatsApp voice messages and WhatsApp voice messages alone. I recently ordered some saris from Bhavalpur, and all communication happened through WhatsApp voice messages and him sending over pictures from his shops, right? So there is that. The functionality is it's just so easy. But secondly, also, particularly when you talk about women entrepreneurs, Facebook and Instagram or social media has a bit of a stigma attached still, particularly in rural Pakistan. A girl who's on Facebook is not, a young girl who joins Facebook sometimes isn't allowed to by her brothers or her family still. So a lot of these girls, even when they're using Facebook, they do it through a cousin's profile or a friend's profile or a fake, boy's name profile, etc. They don't use it enough to learn how to use it for business. And families also don't understand the need for these women to be on a public platform. That is why they start selling through WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is allowed. WhatsApp is a communication tool. And also, when they're selling through WhatsApp, and this is perhaps a limitation for them, when they start selling through WhatsApp, they usually don't get access to any markets outside of their own social circle. So who are they selling it to? They sell their products to their family and friends. They sell their products to their neighborhoods. They get invited to other women groups pretty much from their own socioeconomic segment in their own city, and they get added to their groups, and all of the women are sharing their products on those groups and buying and selling to each other, which again is a limitation, because that means their businesses do not grow beyond a certain point, because they're not graduating to any platform where they can access other markets. But that's what the families want. The families are okay with that, because that means that the women are not engaging with or being seen on any public platform which can then label them as bad women or bad girls, etc. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but this is also something. And I've had conversations with women entrepreneurs, because part of my training was around access to markets and getting them to think about creating higher value goods and selling to higher value markets. Because right now, um, your micro SMEs, particularly in your lower socioeconomic segment, are creating bad quality products or okay quality products and selling them at very low prices to their own immediate socioeconomic circles, because those are the circles that are accessible to them. So how do we graduate them? How do we get them out of that zone? How do we get them out of that thought process, and into realizing either the value of the product, and the fact that they can sell mangoes at a higher price to a better socioeconomic class, um, or getting them to create better products that they can then market to the rest of the country or the world.
Ms. Tariq, thank you very much. That was very interesting, and actually that connects very nicely with our next panelist, Ms. Salim from Bykea. Ms. Salim, Bykea seems to be targeting informal online commerce sellers with a range of services. Bykea Checkout is one of those services, it seems to me, that's directly targeted. Again, same question for you. Do you find our framing around informal online commerce persuasive? And can you speak to the opportunity low-income women present for Bykea in Pakistan?
Hey, thanks for the question, Johan. And it's really interesting. I was just listening to Meenah, and a lot of things like that she's saying, although like they might sound like cliches when you're standing outside of Pakistan, but they're so real when you're on the ground, and especially like she's worked with women entrepreneurs. And I think as we have grown up in a world which is where barriers are getting broken, it's still hard to imagine that those cliches exist, but they do. And that's what we've also seen in Bykea's journey. And we didn't want to so the one thing, so Bykea Checkout / Bykea Cash is what we are calling it, is more of a new service that we recently launched, which is targeted to one of the target markets is that women entrepreneur. But what we already have right now, and the data that we are seeing, is we have a service called delivery. So where you basically collect cash on delivery, or you get paid in some way through Bykea on delivery of an item. From Meenah's example, like the tailor that she's collecting the goods from. So either you're paying through your wallet, or you're paying through, in certain circumstances, even a debit card. Right. So what we've seen organically there is that a bunch of women entrepreneurs who are home-based they have bakeries, they have these keto food like services that they're sending, like subscription services. They're selling clothes, and like talking to them. So right now today, our product is not friction free there, right? Because we have really built on Savari, which is our ride hailing business, but we're just building on these other verticals. But these women entrepreneurs have gone on and just like so these frictions like don't matter to them, right? We have, and that's kind of shown by our numbers. We have kind of doubled this delivery business organically over the past few months. right? And a large bulk of this is coming from these women entrepreneurs who are, a lot of them are in that segment. Like if you remember the 2x2 that Dr. Bajwa shared, they're in the 40 and above kind of segment where they are empowered enough in the family that they've taken that stand that, I want to do something, I want to add supplement an income. They've earned that trust, but they're not digitally literate, right? And they are kind of reaching out to their husbands, their kids that, can you order a Bykea for me? Or can you figure out how cash works here? And while their kids and husbands are enabling them, or other male or female members, younger female members are enabling them, they're out there running their bakeries and selling their products, and the last mile is kind of completed by us. So what's another interesting thing that we are kind of seeing is that it's not actually the low income women. And I think that's something that Dr. Bajwa just pointed out in his initial slides. It's actually, these women are heavily belong to the SECB, which is household income of around 100,000 to 300,000. So the low income women, we did not see many examples of them in this COD business. And I think it's these SECB women, they're still very price and value conscious, because for the hypothesis that we have is that they're actually really trying to make the unit economics of their business work. But they're very particular that why is the right price in a certain way? Why would you charge a fee off of any cash that you're collecting? So they're very particular about the unit economics of their business. But we haven't seen many the low income women part. So I would like to, and I think Dr. Bajwa kind of covered that as well, but I would like you guys to kind of dig a little deeper on that and see exactly who are these women, because there is a phenomenal opportunity to enable low-income women in Pakistan right now. But it's not organically happening, because while the barriers to break for them are much higher, is my obviously assumption. I haven't talked to many of these women, but any woman that you talk to in Pakistan will kind of give you harrowing tales of what they have to go through day by day, right? I mean, especially in the low income sector. So, I mean, my guess would be that their barriers to entry are much higher, and they're not as empowered as, let's say, a 40 or 45-year SECB/SEC A- who's selling goods from the home.
Thank you. There was a lot there, but thank you for that was very insightful. I think I would be interested as just to throw another sort of follow-up question to you, but sort of from, as you know, we are probably most interested in the low-income women or just above. If you could maybe, do you have any thoughts for maybe for us as CGAP, NRSP, or really anyone, what should be in place to really unlock this? I mean, Dr. Bajwa talked a little bit about access to a telephone, to a smartphone, an internet connection. Can you maybe talk us through some of the constraints, maybe something that the government might need to do for us to follow up on? Thank you.
So I think so there's a bunch of stuff there, right? I mean, and a lot of that is so. And one other thing that I should add there, like the Bykea operates in KLI, so urban areas heavily. So maybe that's one of the reasons we're not tapping the SECCs very heavily. But most of our driver partners come from SECC. So I mean, it's not like the existence isn't there. So I think on your question, so for the lower economic class women, a lot of the barriers are also of culture and the mental barriers, the mental chains that are put on them. I remember I had this helper, and she just believed that she could not use a phone, right? And no matter how much, she had a feature phone, but she would not know how to call from it. And she was a smart woman. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, and just like because she had been repeatedly told that you cannot do it, and again, a stereotype, right? You kind of would expect that we're beyond that, but we're not. Like there's so many basic challenges that are still there, so many low-hanging fruits that can be tapped into. And then another one that, you know, around religion, like there's a lot of like women to exist in spaces outside of homes is still very frowned upon, right? And for especially for these women, if they just the cultural taboo of work is phenomenal. Like, I mean, it's just it's mind blowing, right? If somebody was helping out with my son, they would make it a point to, like, I mean, I tremendously appreciate. I think it's a very honorable job, but you know, they would just not be able to tell their family about it, right? So just the barriers to break are so basic right now that, you know, for example, one way to do that would be to change the role models that are appearing on screens, right? And that's a very low-hanging fruit that people can tap into. I haven't seen recent Pakistani TV, but you know, the one that what I saw earlier was harrowing, right? I mean, the way that they depict women is I don't know. I mean, it needs to change. Like a lot of change will, and since the forms of entertainment and what's being how the culture is being defined is very I think those spaces are very limited right now. So just interrupt in those spaces and actually put positive role models forward, because, you know, I mean, right now it's that once that mental barrier breaks, a lot of the other things, these women are hustlers, right? They will, the other friction they can overcome, but you know, just the low hanging barriers need to be removed first.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm seeing Meenah. You seem to be nodding and may want to weigh in here.
Yeah.
Oh, Meenah, sorry, you're quite inaudible, so I don't know if you're able to speak up.
Can you hear me better now?
Slightly.
Oh, I don't know. Is it at all better now?
It's audible. Thank you.
Sorry about that. No, I just wanted to say, to Sophia's point, there was recently a TV serial where they showed a woman who was in trouble, and you know, she had financial issues as well, and she started a business completely online. She started baking cakes, and she set up a business page on Facebook, and she started taking orders on WhatsApp. And this was a proper, like, this was a proper TV serial. Like, it was a proper TV drama that a lot of people were watching. It was a trending TV show. And I heard in my trainings afterwards, so many women discussed that example. So I completely agree with Sophia, because they talked about that. She was the heroine of the show. You know, she started a business. She was pregnant, so she couldn't get a job. She started the business and she supported herself and her family through online commerce, and it was really well received. So I agree with Sophia. I think we really need to create more and more role models of this sort.
Thank you. So I think I'll turn to Dr. Bajwa now, because we've been talking a lot about low-income women, and I don't think there's an organization out there that deals more with this particular group than NRSP. Dr. Bajwa, maybe you can speak a little bit more to where you might see some of the opportunities for low-income women, maybe getting to grips with this type of economic activity. One of the hunches that we have looking at all these different countries is that even though middle-class women might tend to be sellers or upper-class women, that they tend to deal with female value chains. So maybe there is a trickle-down effect with other women that they're dealing with. So maybe you could speak to that as well. Thank you.
No, as I said, I am very optimistic. We're very excited for this research, and it's opened up a lot of new ideas for us. I think it's important that rather than taking a very generic review, maybe we should start focusing on some particular groups. I mean, you should have the target group. I'm just talking about the rural entrepreneurs at the moment. Just off the cuff, I was thinking that young women who have done middle education or matriculation, who are recently married or something. So we just identify them. So this could be one cohort. And the other cohort would be middle-aged women who have their children who are now grown-ups and they have enough time for them. So these are the I think, two groups which needs to be, first of all, targeted to do any kind of an information, education, and communication campaign. Because that's, to me, is very important. And to develop the IEC material is another very core activity in order to disseminate this information. And then leave it to the women. I mean, I think and the entrepreneurial activities can be massive. I mean, just imagine we are sitting in cities and all of us want whole wheat, hand ground, hand milled wheat flour, for example. Now we know every household in the villages, most of, at least in Punjab and part of Sindh, they have wheat with them. And just imagine they're selling wheat at 1,800 rupees per 40 kilogram. They can actually make 3,600 rupees. They can double their income by just doing this. And these are the products which they have with them in their house. So we're not talking about women moving away and doing some exotic new products. We're talking about the kind of the products which they are used to in a household. It could be corn, it could be many other things. So starting from there, and then if you have institutional backup of financing, particularly the interest-free loans, which now is going to come supposedly, then just imagine unlocking these. And what do you need further? You need a little phone, and this Google phone is something which is there for I think it's selling for 4,000 rupees or something. I don't know what this is the price which Jazz is selling it for. So so we are working with Google. I think we have with us Mr. Nick, who is keen to look at the Pakistani market for a Pakistani kind of the Sati program which they did in India. And just to give this information around that women can, while they're sitting in their home, they can start their own businesses, and then they can, of course, grow with them. So what was needed was this network, organizations of women, like the self-help groups in India. We call it the village organizations and the local support organizations. So this is the base on which we work, organizations like NRSP and other rural support programs. So this whole work has already been done. So the communication channels have been established. So now you just need to bring in some specialists to develop this IEC campaign, to try kind of tell women, at least sit with them and open their imagination ideas about what is it that they can do themselves or with their families, and how they can move ahead. Rural areas in Pakistan have changed a lot in the last 20 years. You don't find any mud house anymore in the rural villages anywhere in Pakistan, even in remote areas also. So there has been a development, but it is haphazard. So you walk in a village, it's dirty, it is congested, it is filthy, all of it. You walk in a house, it's absolutely pristine and clean. So there is no kind of that civic sense that you have to also clean your environment has to take time. There are now groups, I know for sure, like in Hasilpur, in Tehsil Bahawalpur, where the entire Tehsil villages have done a cleaning exercise and that they are managing their sanitation, solid waste. Likewise in Tandu Muhammad Khan in Sindh, where we're doing an experiment. And you'll be surprised how women respond to it. I mean, they segregate the waste at their house level. They're making their own compost, and they're selling the products to scavengers, which were they just throwing out in the street now. So all this civic sense is coming up. So timing of this is interesting, and we can actually work further on it. All the ingredients are there. Somebody just needs to come and connect them together.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bajwa. Again, there's a lot there. We've had some questions on the chat around risks, and some of the risks that we've run into in some of the other countries, like Bangladesh, particularly, was the risk of informal online commerce relegating women more to the home. It's a way of keeping them maybe away from the marketplace. Maybe a question for Ms. Tariq. Do you see the same type of risks here in Pakistan, and do you project any other ones that with which we should be tempering our enthusiasm for something like this? Thank you.
Okay, so I think I answered on chat as well. So IOC is actually more of a way to get these women to start out, because see, it is safe, it is seen as safe, it is seen as socially appropriate. So there's a higher probability that a woman will get the get the permission, so to say, from her family to start off through this route. But then the next step, it has to be her graduating from this small bubble to which she can sell to and get to better and better markets. And that is what I said, that is what I was sharing, in that a lot of my training then had to be to try and get them to see what the issues were with their pricing strategies, to see what the issues were with their product itself, because they were creating low value products at low prices and continue to sell them to low value markets. A lot of the women actually, I have to tell you, with the 600 plus women that I spoke to, the majority was selling their products at a lower price than what it was costing them to make their product, or what was costing them to actually provide that service. And this was with the belief that with the belief that the market was price sensitive, with the belief that if they price things lower, they'll be able to, attract customers, and then someday at some point they'll be able to increase their prices. Also, most of these women don't do costing too well, so they have really no idea what the cost of the product is that they're making and they're selling. So this is a trap. And the problem with this trap is also because their business never makes any real money. It's merely a circulation of cash, right? So they get some cash and then they're able to pay off a bill, and then they use some money that their husband has given them for groceries, and they put that into the business instead. And then there's no line between personal and business finance. It's just cash flow. But their business, because it never grows, because they never really make any real money, nobody takes them seriously. So for most of these women, when I say, do you think your family takes your business seriously? No, they don't. Does your family introduce your business like it's a hobby, like it's a side thing that you do? Yes, it is. And this is true even for women who've been doing that particular business for 15 years or 20 years. It is because of bad business strategies. And I say this with no judgment because nobody has ever taught them any better. But those bad business strategies keep them stuck in that cycle of selling low value goods to low value markets. And that's the bubble that somebody was talking about in chat as well. And so sorry, long story short, there has to be a method to help them to graduate, and that's where a lot of programming can come in, right? You teach them how to create a business on WhatsApp. You teach them and you convince them that this is possible. During the lockdown, during the very first wave, I had to teach my meat seller, my butcher, how to operate his business online, and he was very very reluctant. I convinced him that no, I'll place an order on WhatsApp, and you can send it to me on Kareem Bike or Bykea, and I will transfer money to you on one of the mobile wallets. And when he did it the first time, he was very comfortable doing it ever after. And that's what happens with so many of these businesses. So you've got to show them the pathway, but then a few years in or a year or so in, you've got to show them how to graduate to the next platform, because otherwise, yes, they'll be stuck in that bubble and they'll never be able to graduate.
Thank you. A very interesting point around the circulation of cash and that dwindling over time. Very interesting perspective, so thank you for that. We're coming to the end of time, but I'm just going to give maybe Ms. Salim, if you had any sort of closing thoughts or anything you wanted to get off your chest before we end, I wanted to open the floor to you.
Yeah, so I think I completely agree with what Meenah said about this. Like, I mean, it's just so some right. So growing an entrepreneurial venture, there's a rite of passage that you have to follow in any case, right? I mean, it's hard, and like it's a life, even in a lifestyle business that most of these women are operating. There is like the growth will the static, the normal curve, uh, when there's no change, will not meet as much resistance as when they decide to grow. And the more exponential that is, the more challenges they will face that kind of prepares them for the next level of the business. So all of that is well and good. And that is like part of the process. But what's not part of the process are some of the barriers that they have to face from their home, from their culture, from the way they're looked at. Those are the ones that a social organization needs to come in and remove. The others, they have to grow into. And that's part of the process. And there they can have like mentors, like, for example, Meenah, who's like talking to these women, 600 women. So that's fairly amazing. But the mentors need that community needs to be built out, but they also need to go through the constructive pain. But other barriers need to be removed for sure.
Thank you very much. So it's pretty clear that we're really just at the beginnings of understanding this, at least as we as an organization. We have a lot more to do. I wanted to thank you all, dear panelists, and I really want to thank you for your inputs. And Ms. Tariq, thank you so much also for engaging on the chat and adding a lot of value there as well. I'd just like to hand it over to Ms. Neha, who kicked this off, and then we'll bring this to a close. Thank you.
Thanks, Joep. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the presenters and the participants for taking time out of their busy schedules. So just in terms of follow-up from our end, we'll be using the emails that you provided during registration to share the materials from this webinar. That includes the presentation, as well as a link to the full video recording in case you want to rewatch it or to share it with others. We'll also be sharing in the coming few months a focus note from CGAP on informal online commerce. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And we're happy to keep everyone in the loop for that. And then finally, if people on this chat who've been watching the seminar, if you guys are interested in engaging further in some way with NRSP and CGAP to continue this work, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll share some information as to who you can reach out to for that. That's it from our end. Thank you so much again to everyone who was here. Appreciate everyone for participating. Good afternoon, everyone.